Google's not in the Google domain thing anymore. Fucking pandemonium. Oh wait, shh. I was supposed to curse. Well, I don't know. Sean's never yelled at me for cursing. But I'm sure now that I said
Just
it.
don't say that. Just don't say that. Don't say fuck or asshole or anything like that. You should be fine.
Shh. All right, that's all right. I did a little bit of a joke, and then Dev just took it way overboard. I could have got away with the one, and then Dev had to double down.
Either way, it's all good.
Oh my god, we got an Aussie on the stream. I think the restrictions should be lifted.
Talk about swearing. You don't want to get me started on that side.
Now, Australia, you are. I read on a bio somewhere. By the way, we'll do the introductions in a second. But for Casey John Ellis, founder, chairman, right? CTO. You have so many things behind your name of Bug Crowd.
All the hats. Yep.
Wearing all the hats. I read in your bio. We have Devin Brandon too, by the way. They're also here.
Thanks.
You guys had a whole show to yourselves last week. You got to run the show. How'd that go, by the way?
It was great. I mean, we actually showed up on time. We ended when we was like a little bit after, but everything was organized. Went so smooth.
Yeah, I'm sure. I got to go back and watch it now because I don't believe any of you. Casey, one of your bios told me that you were it says expat Australian. Is that did you relinquish your citizenship, or is that just now you're just here?
No, we're just here. Like we've been here in the US since 2013. Like started the company off in Australia, and once it got moving, which was pretty quick after kicking it off, we relocated to the Bay Area, and that was sort of always the plan, and been here ever since. Aside from going back and forth with family and different things like that, so I'm still an Australian citizen and still go back there pretty frequently. But the US is where I call home.
What position? Sorry, Freudian slip. What possessed? Not, hey, what made you want to come here? I was like, what possessed you to come here? Was it for the business, or you just like the quality of living in the U.S.?
The business. Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, look, a big thing like being in the Bay Area, just the whole tech startup thing. In the very early stages of doing Bug Crowd, it's like, all right, this thing's either going to catch on fire and fail, or it's going to move really quickly. If it does the latter, then we want to be in a place where it can be, resourced as effectively and efficiently as we can get it to be. And that's the Bay Area. It's kind of like being, back at that point in time, it's like being in acting and going to Hollywood. Like there's nothing that special about Hollywood. It's just been doing it for the longest. So if you go there, you've got access to the most kind of stuff, if that makes sense. So that was pretty much the extent of the logic. And that, that ended up being a really good decision because, we kind of kicked off this space and it became pretty crowded pretty quickly. So had we stayed in Australia, we would have been competing against folk that were resourced by all that stuff in North America. And that would have actually been a lot more difficult for us.
What's just for kicks and giggles, because I never assume, as I don't think any of us should, expertise of people. Some people are new, some people might not know. How dare you if you don't? Tell us, what is Bug Crowd?
What is a Bug Crowd?
What is a Bug Crowd? Besides having so many stickers on my various replaceable laptop lids.
Yeah, I joke sometimes that we're a swag company that like dabbles in security stuff. Because we've definitely done a lot of different designs and stickers and just stuff over the years to kind of rally hackers together and connect them in with the broader market. And that's really what we do. So what Bug Crowd didn't invent bug bounty programs or vulnerability disclosure. That was prior art, but we were the first to come out with this idea of basically building out a platform that connects all of the different things that the ethical hacking community know and can do with all of the different problems that might exist on the defender side. Pen test, bug bounty, VDP are three examples of what that looks like. But the broader idea is like, all right, fundamentally, our job is to kind of outsmart all the bad guys before they do bad things. If security is a fundamentally creative problem, then we need access to as much creativity as we can get our hands on. Coming up from the hacker community, I think the other problem that I wanted to solve was to change the operating environment for hackers as well, in terms of, we're actually a part of the solution a lot of the time, not just part of the problem. I think 10 years ago when we started, that wasn't well understood. Definitely wasn't reflected in the law and different things like that. We've seen a lot of change in that area over the past 10 years as well. So that's kind of the ecosystem of what we do. But Bugcrowd specifically is about plugging smart people into hard problems.
One of the first talks that I ever went to, and I don't know, maybe just talk about it and comment on it if you want. One of the first security talks I ever went to, and I didn't really know who I was looking at. Ooh, we have a new subscriber, and my alert thing didn't come up. Why is nothing working? Usually this does front smoother, Casey. It was the second
Friday, man. So cool.
Oh my god. Everything's like, oh my god, and now your videos. Wait, why is your video? Never mind. That's my other thing. I am trying to fix the alert thing. Thank you to whoever just subscribed to the channel. We always appreciate you. I
think it was Matt.
Was it Matt? I'm sorry, Maticus Maximus, as Matt's in chat.
Unsubscribe and subscribe again. We're gonna figure this out.
Yeah, we're gonna figure this out. We really like you to be there.
Are we signed up for Bugcrowd? I mean, maybe they could have helped us get this taken care of.
I don't think Bugcrowd counts bugs in my firmware, like my personal firmware.
We could probably do that, maybe, but
yeah, I saw anyway. I saw talk. It was at SummerCon in New York, and it was Dino Dizovi and Charlie Miller doing a second no free bugs.
Yep.
And at the time, I was like, what does that mean? What is your where do I want to go with this? Because we've ranted about like responsible disclosure and shit like that. Where are you on that, Casey?
Where do I sit on that? I think bugs are like vulnerabilities are valuable, and the idea of like no free bugs, I think at the time was really like it was a really important thing to say, partly because of that whole like a hacker's part of the solution, or are they just part of the problem? Like part of that went to vulnerabilities aren't valuable, and that was, I think, a part of what Dino and Charlie were trying to kind of push against and educate around at the time. At the same time, I actually do think that the internet, like it's broken. It's like Neighborhood Watch. It's a bad neighborhood in that sense, and the ability for people to just let someone know that there's a problem at their own discretion, I think that's a good thing as well. So it's funny. I think people getting paid for vulnerabilities is the right thing, especially if they're digging in and putting work into it and actually really trying to be proactive about it. And everyone's got to eat, so I think that factors into it as well. But I don't necessarily think that should be to the exclusion of folks just doing things because they think they should or they think they can from a help and safety standpoint. It's a weird, like, I know that's a futzy answer. Because I actually believe pretty strongly in both things. Do you know what I mean? And they do kind of pull in the opposite direction. But at this point in time, I think back then, this was a really, like, people didn't get this idea at all back then in the general population, and today they do. So I think our the environment that we're having the conversation in today is very different to when Charlie and Dino did that.
So I got a question about.
Yeah, go ahead, Dev.
I like to ask. One thing that really frustrates me is like, okay, I'm working with an application or software, or I have an IoT device in my house, and I find something, and I go on Bugcrowd or whatever, one of the other sites out there, look them up. Nope, they're not there. So I go through the painstaking of sending an email to their support staff, only to say, what you're doing is violates our term and services and all this other bullshit. When it's like, I'm scanning a port for an alarm system that I basically took off Wi-Fi for 15 minutes. Why won't you fix this? So is there a way we could actually shame companies for not joining services like this and be like, hey,
that's what full disclosure. Yeah, that's like, it's funny. I did a debate. I got called to do a debate at one point in favor of full disclosure, and I think everyone's like, "Oh, Casey's going to freak out at this," because a lot of what Bugcrowd does really is more like crowdsourcing than it is disclosure. So it's not going to the open internet and getting information from point A to point B. That's a big part of what we do, and that's kind of the noisy side of it. But the bigger piece of what we do, volume-wise, is actually more like crowdsourcing. It's like, I've got this really hard thing This like target that's got weird code in it, it's weird silicon, weird technology, it's part of a weird ecosystem. Access to talent that can actually understand this thing, let alone exploit, it's pretty scarce. So how do I connect? A big part of what we've built is almost like kind of, I describe it as Match.com for people that break computers, right? So we're kind of connecting it up like that. But the noisy part's the disclosure piece. So the assumption was that I'd be against full disclosure as a bad thing, and I wasn't. I kind of won that debate, because my point of view is that full disclosure is like you can hate it all you like. It's like hating death and taxes. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, that's the option of last resort. If as a hacker who's found a thing, who is committed and determined to getting that information into a place where the risk that you've identified can be fixed, when everything else fails, your option of last resort is basically just to dump it on the internet and let nature sort it out, right? To me, that to me is a failure of everything else that should happen before that, right? But that's kind of so when you're saying, can we name and shame to get people to do that? I think that's a thing that's been happening pretty much this entire time. What I'd rather do with that, and this is actually a big part of what we've done with the Disclose.io project, which is a separate thing, but kind of a very adjacent thing to BugCrowd, is to try to reward organizations, make it easy to adopt a vulnerability disclosure process, make it easy to have a policy that doesn't freak the lawyers out, that creates safe harbor for researchers so they don't feel like they're going to get their door kicked in, all that good stuff. But then also kind of reward the fact that they're trying to do the right thing. And if you can create kind of a virtuous cycle, then all of a sudden it becomes more of a carrot conversation than a stick conversation. And I think it's important because, we're all about the stick in this industry, right? And if we come in hot to a company that hasn't really thought this through, they might be in a really bad state and they should listen to us, and they're doing security poorly, and they're we can rant all day about how irresponsible they are with that sort of thing. But if you put yourself in their shoes, they've never really thought about this before, and we're coming in hot. Of course that's gonna turn into a fight, and it's gonna be less productive than it could be if it was collaborative. So aspirationally, that's what I try to kind of, when I think about how to solve this problem at the system level, that's how I think it's best solved. Yeah, that was a whiny answer to your question, but that problem happens all the freaking time. You know what I mean? We've got community.disclose.io, which is basically Hacker Connect, because what happens generally is that at the end of your efforts to try to find the right person, there's myself and probably a couple of dozen other people that are just the folks that know how to get in touch with the right people, and at some point one of us will get a tap on the shoulder, and things tend to happen that way. That's good, but it doesn't scale, and it doesn't encourage companies to actually get proactive about making how to get that information to them obvious. So there's a whole bunch of different things. Disclose.io is a good place to go check out the different kind of tools that are available. And I think the reason that we did that separately and kind of made it a not-for-profit open source thing is that BugCrowd can help companies run those programs, but they should be doing it anyway. Do you know what I mean? We're at a point where the internet this should just be a part of being on the internet, and to actually restrain that by forcing them to be a customer of one platform or the other or whatever else, I don't think is actually appropriate for solving that problem.
With that, one thing I would love to see sites start doing, or at least a company do, and I tried to get people to support this idea, and it kind of fell down. It's how in New York State, I think New York City and maybe California, you go to restaurants, they have this grade letter for restaurants. This is an A, that's a B. Yep. I don't know why my video is cut off, but it disappeared. Great job, Web. Great job, $200 camera.
What are you doing, Dev?
I'm not doing nothing. I'm talking. I'm not even touching my computer.
Into this question, but that's pretty funny too.
I don't know what just happened. Let me just change camera.
You need sound effects.
Maybe it worked. Maybe it won't.
Whenever I'm not the one screwed up, it's always Dev.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
If not Danny equals Dev.
Anyway, great letter. Go.
Okay. So for websites, they should have that report card where you go and you understand the security health of a site, and you could go. So that way, as a consumer, if I want to use X, Y, and Z website, I could go to this third-party site that evaluate them from security. How are they what information are they storing? How are they storing it? Are they compliance with storing credit card information properly, or authentication information properly? That's the basic stuff. so that way if I'm putting my credit card in there, I don't have to have worries that, oh, wait, something's going to happen and I'm going to leak my credit card information, or this site is a reputable site that's been doing business for 15 years.
You're spot on, man. You're spot on. I think what gets interesting with creating a scorecard or some sort of like rating system like that is that it gets complicated to the point where the user doesn't have a fucking clue what you're talking about, like really quickly. And I think a lot of the time when security people try to design, like you look at, the vendor risk management systems, you look at some of the work that, Mudge did in DARPA around IoT, like there's been a lot of different efforts to try to create not like SBOM, but actually kind of this, kind of list of proxy indicators of maturity that imply that, one product's more secure than the next, as well as like, frankly, I think a list of proxy indicators of shittiness as well, because it kind of goes in both directions, right? The tendency is to overcomplicate that, and I think that's kind of slowed down, the kind of proliferation of that idea. But I completely agree with that. We actually use that that phenomena that you're talking about with the 2020 election to drive adoption of full disclosure at the federal level and at the state level, and then amongst the voting machine manufacturers, because we knew from about 2017 onwards that the integrity of the systems themselves, it was actually more of an information warfare problem than a cybersecurity problem. Like it's both, right? But you've got to actually address both. So one of the ways of doing that was to be able to say, hey, like this is neighborhood watch for the internet. This is how we're finding vulnerabilities. There's transparency like automatically associated with that, but also as a consumer, as a voter, right? I can look at that and go, oh, I kind of get that. Like I don't get what the hell they're talking about with XDR or what they're doing in their SDLC or all these acronyms or fancy stuff that I don't understand because I'm not a technologist. But the idea of neighborhood watch for the internet is something that for me, I can sort of look at that and feel more confident, feel like I've got a greater sense of trust in the fact that things are being done that are positive from a security standpoint. So, I do see VDP in particular really slot into that. I think bug bounty, if you talk about VDP with a reward, and turning that into a bug bounty, I see that as kind of an elevated version of that. But the interesting thing with that is that I don't think every company actually should do a public bug bounty program. I think every company can crowdsource. I do think that every company needs to have the ability to receive security reports from the outside. I don't think that every company necessarily should go out and incentivize security reports from the outside because maybe they're just not ready for it. Do you know what I mean? So there's all of these different things that slot into kind of the concept that you just laid out in my world. And I think just in general, it's 100% true. Like consumers right now, they're worried. Like this is actually a talk that I give a lot. We're at a point now where, pretty much the average non-technical person considers cyberspace as an extension of their physical space. Therefore, the way they think about safety in the physical space actually transits across into cyber, and they're worried about stuff. They have no idea what's going on, how it works, what they should specifically be concerned about, but they're generally concerned, which actually gives us a lot to work with. Do you know what I mean? It's not about like, let's make them more afraid. It's more like, here's how you make smart decisions. Like the green padlock is a great example, like SSL. To me, that the way that whole thing rolled out, initially it's like, cool, like we're awesome because we have this SSL thing that no one understands, but you see the green padlock and you understand that hacking could be a thing. So you gravitate towards places where you see it, to the point where like now it's gone away and there's a red padlock where it doesn't exist. I think
that's what I'm about to say.
Yeah.
It went in Chrome and everyone to say, hey, we're just going to get rid of that and just say when it's bad.
Yeah, exactly. And like that took 20 years. You know what I mean? Like, this is a design problem that plays out over a long period of time. And I think from a solution standpoint, security folk that are thinking about like the system level problems actually need to think about it as that kind of arc and over that kind of time scale, because design and how users interact with what we do is a really massive player in the mix. And oftentimes I think that gets kind of overlooked.
All right, I'm going to ask you one more question. I'll give it over to Brandon so he can ask some questions.
Here, I have something real quick on before you go past that. So I just came up. I wanted to poke fun at the government for a second. So the .gov websites.
That's nice, Brandon.
My grandpa just sent me a link that says pay.gov, and I'm like, that can't be a real website, can it? And I click on it like an idiot. And it's a real site that looks like garbage, but at the very top there's a banner and it says something like, how do you know this is us, or how do you know this is real? And you click like a little drop down and it explains anything in a .gov domain is, belongs to the government. And then it also showed like the green check box. So even websites, like at least the government knows their websites look like garbage. So they
But I mean, if a website is telling you that is good, do you really trust that information it's telling you?
Well, when you can see it in the URL, like me, yes, like, okay, I understand it, but so I guess to a certain degree, you're right. You have to
know like how to validate.
It also means if there's an open redirect on a .gov, like you got a really big problem because that entire PLD is trusted by the user base in that way. So there's no, this is the thing, is there's no perfect solution to any of this stuff. I do think sort of boiling it back to like, what are the design fundamentals? Yeah, to me, if you can make insecure easy, and if you can make secure obvious, and if you can like aspire towards those two main design goals in anything that you do, you're at least heading in the right direction. And actually like achieving that, like arriving at either of those as an end state, I don't actually think that's possible, but to pull in that direction, I think is a good thing to do.
So my last question was, there's a couple of times I try to go into the bug crowd kind of bug bounty kind of thing. And when I go into there, I see these sites and they listen, oh, we want you to look at this following error, but do not go blah, 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 blah. And it's like a freaking book of what you cannot do, to the point where it's kind of it's just so discouraging. Like, how do you work with companies to kind of help them say, I get what you're trying to do, but you need to be kind of more open so that people will actually test this thing? Like,
we do. I mean, it's referential proof over time. I dislike that for the same reasons you do. And the reason that it's there is that usually when people are starting to do this, they're not comfortable with it because they're doing it for the first time, right? So you've got to find ways you got to work with the things that are going to make them more comfortable, even if they're going to be restrictive in a way that's not ideal, right? Get them going with that, get them comfortable with the core concept, and then talk about the fact that if you open your aperture up, you're actually going to get better findings. You're going to get a more kind of realistic view of your security posture. And this is, here's examples of other companies that we've worked with that have done that, blah, 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 blah. Like working with federal government in the US, we do a lot of work with, CISA and Department of Defense in particular. And as you'd imagine, like DoD are pretty squirrely about, or were pretty squirrely about who operated on their programs at the outset, because their whole mindset is around like compartmentalization, clearances, all these different things. They've got this kind of cultural instinct to restrict access just based on their operating model, right? So that's reasonable. It's not ideal, because the narrower the aperture, the less talent you're going to have available to solve the problem that you got. But you can kind of understand why they started there. So we started with that, delivered proof against that, and then had the conversation around the fact that opening that aperture is a good thing, and they've steadily done that over time. That's pretty much how it works right across the board. And yeah, with public programs, it's an interesting one, because I think there's definitely, I mentioned before the difference between public VDP and bug bounty, and then private crowdsourcing. Like with private crowdsourcing, we could just be focusing on, like we've done programs where it's like a prototype vehicle in an ecosystem. So the customer who's doing that work, who wants that kind of security feedback, that's a very controlled and very confined environment, and straying out of scope is not okay. But because it's confined in that way, and that's like clear to the people that get invited to that program, it's different to when it's just kind of out on the open internet. So yeah, I think. So
I got one more question.
Towards it being open, yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
I let you have a question, Brian. I don't want to
give shorter answers. Keep going.
Yeah, this is your show, Dev. You go ahead.
Don't worry, I'll just be over here.
So I was told, right, by certain people that they use bug bounties in a way to also hide or obfuscate certain traffic when they're trying to find vulnerabilities in the application. At least I was like, okay, and some of the bug bounty says, when you're scraping our site, go through the following IPs, put the following post headers in there, do the following stuff, so that way they can obfuscate the information, while they're really doing a lot of, looking around, poking around, and seeing what's out there.
Yeah, sure.
So how do you combat that kind of scenarios where people are
Same.
openly just targeting?
So, I mean, the first thing that we do, like we do that. We've got a system where we can basically proxy traffic through our infrastructure to create a predictable testing source that can like pinhole in to do internal testing, all sorts of other things like that. First thing is that we don't set expectations on the customer side that absolutely everything that looks bad from the internet is not going to come from that box or is going to come from that box, because it's like you're on the internet. Like if it's publicly addressable, you don't have control over this to begin with. What we can do is give you better insight around stuff that definitively does come from us because of the access control that we've got on that system. And that's a way that you can, if you see test traffic or things that look malicious coming from us, you don't necessarily need to wake up your blue team in the middle of the night, because it's more likely to be stuff that we've got. When it comes to like tagging headers and different things like that, that's useful. I think the way that we frame that, it's more around as a hunter, if you want to be able to like have the recipient go back through your attack chain and know who you are, that's a way to make that easier for them. So what we're not doing is saying to the customer, hey, if it's got this header, don't worry about it, it's fine, for the exact reason that you just said. Like if someone else gets that header, like if it's a secret, we trust, like if we're doing that sort of thing to people that we're giving unique headers to and stuff like that, like we trust them to keep it to themselves, but we also rely on the idea that secrets eventually become public, right? So like as a security control, it's actually not appropriate for that. So that to me is the first thing, right? And I think I've seen other platforms use similar techniques and not necessarily put that caveat in place, and that's where you end up with people with the opportunity to actually hide what they're doing. So there's a bunch of, I mean, I think that's the big thing. I try to talk to customers in terms of like anti-fragility. It's like, no, we can help you identify what's coming from us where we can, but like you got to remember that if it's on the internet, then like the internet is going to do internet things, right? Like, and that will just happen. So like that's your starting point, and what we're trying to do is help you figure out what you need to fix so you can defend yourself better. Like that's the goal here, not to control. The analogy I use is like walking outside when there's a thunderstorm coming and yelling at it and telling it not to hit your house with a tornado. It's like it doesn't care. It's not listening to you. Do you know what I mean? Like that's not. If as an organization you feel like you can do that, you're eventually going to fail, because that's actually not how this works.
Yeah. So, Brandon, you have anything?
Oh yeah, I got tons of stuff. I wanted Brandon to go. I didn't know if Brandon had stuff.
Don't mind me. I'm just gonna sit over in the corner. I'm fine. No, if you want to shift gears, Danny. I mean, I've got a little bit of things, but I'm
oh, we have basically for a very limited time, and I've bothered him enough as it is. So we have him captured. Philip Wiley just had him on his show. He's elusive and he's busy. His company is growing. You just got a new CEO, didn't you? Back in April?
Yeah. Just 12 months ago. Yeah.
Were you the CEO before then?
No, I was in that role for about 6 years, and I went to the board and said, all right, this thing's moving pretty quick, and it would be great to get some more management experience into the mix, so I can just kind of focus up on the stuff I'm good at, which is like interfacing the hacker community to organizations and like seeing around corners in the market. That's the shit I'm good at. Like I love the management stuff, but it's not. I don't wake up in the morning like thinking about it every day kind of thing.
Yeah, I get the longer that I'm in and around and working more startups, like Trimarc, we're 6 years old, and and our CEO is our founder, and I was like understanding that, right? Because like a lot of people don't get like, oh wait, you're the founder, shouldn't you? Some people automatically, myself included, when I was new to this, like, why aren't you CEO if you're the founder?
I get it all the
constantly,
time,
right?
and it's. It's a funny one, because there is definitely, so the dude that we brought in at that point, he was with us for about 5 years, and then it's like, cool, all right, now there's an opportunity to step up in terms of how we're interfacing with the market, and that's when we got Dave and some of the other newer folks in the executive team into the mix. It becomes more. That's when my role as a board member becomes more of the thing, because it's like you can, as a founder, operate hands in the business as CEO and govern through that lens, or you can do it, as a figurehead, because you're always the founder. It's like, being the parent of a child, right?
Sure.
And then there's the board side of it, where it's like, okay, what's the ideal composition? Like, what should the team look like to maximize, the effectiveness and the potential of this thing? So it's been an interesting journey, because it's not the first business I've done, but it's the first one that's venture backed. And there's a ton of stuff that's through trial and error, and a lot through like talking to mentors and getting good advice. I've kind of learned along the way with this one. There's definitely things I'd look at doing differently next time around. But for the better part, I think it's been really cool. And like, the new team's phenomenal. Like the Dave's coming in from like a security background. The people that he's kind of brought in around him have all been in security, specifically around like assurance and offense, pretty much their entire career. So they're very native to the market, and they've got like a native understanding of the hacker community as well, which is exactly what I thought was best. So yeah, that's where that's at. But yeah, that's a whole, like, you want to go off down the like startup management.
Oh, I love that stuff.
The track.
But I also
it's fascinating stuff. But yeah,
I also just usurped. I was about to throw it to Brandon, and I was like, "Here's another whole thing." And Brandon, you just sit there. Go ahead, man.
We've been doing this long enough, Danny, that I already understand how it works.
Retain the question.
Which makes sense though. I had my daughter run in and says, "Here's the dog, we're leaving," and so it was super loud. So I'm glad I wasn't in the middle of saying something.
Oh, doggo.
So I was gonna ask. We talked a little bit. I think we focused mostly on the internet facing bugs and like the bigger companies and the big targets and stuff like that. What about the little guys, or what about the, like Dev was talking about, like a home security system? Or I had an old coworker talk to me about a vulnerability he found in a guitar pedal, and how difficult it was to get them to fix that vulnerability. So what's the path for those companies that, and I don't know, maybe it's just that the bug's not worth it to them, because, or maybe it's harder to fix than it is to find. Like, there's so many different aspects to that. So I'm just kind of curious what you have to say about some of those.
Yeah, no, for sure. I do pretty firmly. Yeah. And this is, you keep in mind, I've been watching this stuff fly back and forth for the last 11 years now. So I've seen some things. Across all of the different kind of customers that Bugcrowd works with, and all of the different types of folks that we've got in the crowd and different skill sets. So it's like, my point of view at this point is that like not every bug necessarily needs to be fixed, and that's partly informed by the fact that like we just can't get around to all of it. Like, writing software is hard, and humans make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes create vulnerabilities, and that's just always going to be true. Like, we'll try to make it easier to avoid and all those different things, but the fact that that's going to be a part of technology, to me, that's just fait accompli at this point. So the bug in the guitar pedal, it's like, okay, what's the threat model for that? Is there an actual like, because there might be a real risk associated with it. I don't know the bug, and I don't know like the deployment environment of that pedal and whatever else. There could be like really good reasons to fix that bug, but on first glance, it looks like a thing that could probably just stay there and it would be fine. Do you know what I mean? So, that's sort of how I weigh it up. I think making software perfect is a fool's errand. I think a lot of the time, security folk who look at assurance, we see things that are broken and that are wrong, and we instinctively want to see those things fixed because that's our bias, right? And that's great as a starting point, but then you've got to kind of overlay like the realities of threat and risk for the user, and then to your point, the realities of fixing and the economics of that versus not fixing for the business. So there's like multiple players in the mix, and I think oftentimes people on the offensive side only think about the parts that they see, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, to have a good security posture, you have to have both the business understanding as well as security, and kind of mesh them. Like, you have to prioritize things. You have to understand. I mean, you have to understand the true risk of whatever